I used to be able to see decently enough without the glasses. However, because I've been wearing glasses since I was 2 years old, the muscles in my eyes are a little bit kind of overused in a way. But then I work in the IT industry. I stare at the laptop 10 to 12 hours a day. I also chose to run a podcast. It's a lot of really focused staring, which is really terrible for your eyes. But then it doesn't even occur to me as a context that it is an accessibility issue for me. I'm just trying to figure out how I could reduce staring at the screen. So it is really hitting close to home. However, thinking about all this in the context of accessibility and what the tools could do to help, it is very important, but I don't think that other than the people like you who are actually working in this area, I don't really hear others talking about it that much, other than maybe the internationalization as translations. That's kind of as far as it goes. It's almost surprising.
It is surprising, and I think that there's a lot of stigma associated with disability. I mean, statistically, 1 in 4 people has a disability. Like that's a huge number of people who have a disability, and like we all know, 4 people. So if you think statistically, like the chances that one of our friends or family has a disability is like, it's off the charts. Like, but we don't talk about it that way. We don't, and a lot of the disabilities are hidden. So how many people have dyslexia? Like that is a disability. Like if you have trouble reading, especially in a literacy culture, that's a real big challenge. We can't necessarily go off and identify somebody who has a disability or doesn't have a disability, but we think we can, because we think we can tell those people who are blind because they have a cane or they have a wheelchair. Like there's these sort of simplified versions that people come to, and it's like no, like not even everyone who is legally blind has a cane. You can be legally blind and be functioning as a like I was in a conference in Kobe, Japan, as it turns out. And talking with this great guy, another Canadian, about things, and he has 10% of his vision. That's all he has left is 10% of his vision. But he has enough vision and enough awareness that I wouldn't have known that in most instances. Like there's a couple places where I was like, oh, he can't see what was, some of the food that was available. The buffet wasn't very useful if he was picky about what he wanted to eat. But other than that, like he looked like I wouldn't have known. And it's I think that there's a lot of people like that, where we make assumptions about people's ability, that are just incorrect, and we don't necessarily have we have a bias to sort of assume that if people are walking around that they don't have a disability, and we have a very narrow definition of what that means.
Yeah, and people usually also try not to advertise their disability, because no one really wants their disability to define them and who they are. So nobody's walking around with a bubble above their head that this is the list of disabilities that I have, and how that makes it harder for me to get around, pick the food, or do whatever else they want to do.
There's also a myth around how what it is to be a human, and I think that people want to believe in our society that you can be an atomic, isolated, independent person. That is a virtue for people to be, and I think that's very much also tied to software. Like we have these visions of these leaders of tech communities, and we tend to see them as like, oh yeah, it was Steve Jobs that did X, or here's like we pick these individuals and we give them the credit because we have a hero myth issue that we're dealing with, as opposed to sort of addressing the community that really is responsible for making it happen. Even looking at things like I remember listening to a great speech by Angela Davis, who was talking about Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement in the U.S. Amazing stuff. But the point, as I recall this talk from ages ago, King is a person that was held up as being the leader of the space. But if there hadn't been thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, especially women, who did the housework of the movement, it wouldn't have happened. Like, it's, there are people who are elevated into positions of power, but are areas of influence, but it really depends on the community, and we don't tell that story enough. There's whether it's in our fiction, like the Harry Potter myths, like so many of our fictional stories come down to a hero, usually a white guy, going off and saving the day, and it's like, well, interesting theory, but like, it's kind of boring, and also it's not reality. So why don't we start telling better stories about how change is actually made in the world?
I love that, and I think that really is important to highlight and keep talking about. And I think this is why the people I know in open source who learned about it and then they were just quote unquote hooked, that we can't really leave the community anymore, because it's not about one person. It's the entire community doing something together. And then, yes, of course, people have bad days and sometimes they're angry and frustrated about something, but deep down it's always a marching towards that goal that the community has and not what individuals have. And even when you look at communities like the Linux kernel, it obviously has Linus Torvalds as the benevolent dictator for life, or BDFL for people who like acronyms, but it's not about everyone is working for him. He makes decisions about the kernel that he thinks will serve the kernel the best. And there are obviously other maintainers in the project as well, in the community, so it's not only him who makes decisions. And the Linux kernel would not exist without the community, and everyone, including Linus Torvalds, knows that. And it's a really good example to what you were talking about, because Linux is in space, circulating around the moon right now.
Yeah, absolutely.
As we speak, and it's because of the community and the speed of innovation that's been happening in the kernel, and the Linux ecosystem overall is also on the community. And you can look at all the companies who are involved, but they are involved in a large community where they all work together so that the kernel itself is solid and it's developed in a high pace.
Yeah, no, there's so much to being able to freely exchange ideas, and to be able to learn about them and share ideas, and to build on each other's successes. Like we're all standing on the shoulders of giants. Everything that I know is being because other people helped me along the way, and to acknowledge that and be able to help realize that they're, hopefully I'm providing guidance and direction that's going to help the next generation be able to take what I've done and go much further than I did. But it's thinking about this as a long-term project, and finding ways to support each other, and even to support each other across different projects. Like I'm very familiar with the Drupal world, but I try and help out the Typo 3 people if I can, or the Joomla people. I was just talking to a maintainer of Joomla earlier today, and it's like there's ways that we can help each other, and can learn from each other, and to test stuff out so that we can get a product that is really as good as it can be. And it's so fascinating when you bring bright people together on a common problem, the kinds of solutions you can come up with.
Yeah, I mean, experiences and skills are transferable. So whenever you do something, when you get involved, get in touch with another community, there's always something you can do. I never experienced that I went someplace and there was literally nothing I could have done because I was new.